AZUSA999 is the next game I played, and apparently it's a game with a lot of history behind it, due to it being one of the oldest RPGmaker games currently on my wheel. On the website for the current translation, there is a foreword on it explaining the history of it. I'm gonna read a bit of it now because it explains it in a way I never could. The venerable RPGmaker Dante 98, the very first official version of RPGmaker, for the good old PC 98 between 1995 and 2001. Enterbrain, the company behind the software, famously held a huge annual RPGmaker game-making contest with their parent company, the ACI Entertainment Software Contest, in which winners could receive up to 10 million yen, $100,000 in today's money. The most notable winner, in retrospect, was the horror adventure cult classic genre progenitor, Corpse Party. What's not as famous though is that this grand contest wasn't the only one of its kind. Between 1997 and 2002, Enterbrain also held a monthly contest for smaller games, with smaller prizes to match via a site called Internet Contest Park, also known as Compark. AZUSA999, submitted for the October 1997 edition of Compark. It netted its creator Ichiro Tsugabe 68,000 yen, which is 654 USD in today's money, and a ripe old age of 19. Though it was seemingly developed in 2 months, his previous winning entry, Clock, was in August of the same year. This story about death and otherworldly terrain was immensely well received. It is beloved by precious few who know it. So yeah, I will be cutting it a lot of slack, at least in the gameplay and technical department, because this game is fucking ancient. That said, I still do have some gripes with the story itself. Anyhow, I thought it was okay. It's around 1 or 2 hours long, and to me, it didn't really stand out that much. I will say that this is a case where I believe I might have some personal bias to it, or I just didn't get it, or it's just not for me, because I feel like I know why people like the story of this so much. I personally don't. That's why, in particular, I recommend you to play this one, because my own enjoyment of the game could be very different to yours. That's why I also won't get into any details of the story.
Hey, normal Mike Nemoid here. I was really debating with myself if I want to get more into why I really didn't vibe with the story, since to me I think it's best to go into these type of story-driven games with almost no information. But I think I need to back up my point of me not liking the story by showing where I think that the story lost me. So for that, I'm gonna do a quick summary and also get into those parts of the story. If you really want to go into this game as blindly as possible, which I honestly recommend a lot, feel free to skip the next segment. Here's the timestamp. That said, I'm gonna get into it. The game follows the character of Hope, who one day ends up deciding to take his own life and jumps in front of an oncoming train. After he does this, he ends up waking up inside of a train, which turns out to be transporting people who have passed away into the afterlife. I think that this plot has been done before, but I can't really put my finger on where I've seen it done before. Still, it's a pretty simple premise with the message of we only have one life, so keep on living, because it's better than not having one. It ends up just following Hope, coming to terms with him wanting to keep on living. They do this pretty well at the beginning with Hope and the engineer, where he finds out that death is much scarier than he thought it was, and that he actually wants to keep on living. I really liked how they set it up, even with how simple it is. That said, afterwards it decides to look into the lives of the other people on this train, since they also took their own lives. I think this could have been handled better, because the way these 3 stories have been handled, for me, just ruined the entire story for me. I genuinely mean it. The entire story so far was Hope coming to terms with his own mortality, and then they add these 3 side stories, which, when done well, could have actually impacted me more, but they just decided to make them edgy and over the top and just nonsensical as possible. For the first story of the student, like, I really started to get into it with, the entire story of bullying. But then it just ends up with her going on a mass murder spree and killing off her classmates. It completely put me out of the entire seriousness of the game. Like, you had a perfectly fine storyline, but then you just put this edgy and shock twist ending, and just completely ruins the entire feel of it. Afterwards, you have the story of the soldier, which has a really nice core message, and I really fucking liked until the twist ending. Like, the core message of the struggles one goes through for their loved ones is like really fitting, but then it just ends up getting fucked over by the twist ending reveal, like, oh, the person was actually doing all this work for, she wasn't even her loved one. We actually swapped them with somebody who they're not even related. And that was all part of the plan. It just completely just puts down the story as a whole and takes out of the seriousness. There's no reason for you to have been this shocking out of nowhere just to like shock the reader, because it just actually brought down the entire quality of the game. The last one is, I think, implied to just be Jack the fucking Ripper. Why? In the story itself, There were some shocking scenes, but they never went over the top. Having random over the top edgy scenes and ratchet storylines with Jack the fucking Ripper, a soldier who actually got tricked by some people, and then a perfectly fine bullying story who ends with her going and killing off her classmates, it just goes completely against the actual story of the game. And these stories have like a really good core message, but when it's just mixed with so much flair and just so much stuff that just it muddies the actual core message and makes it bad. It's just there for shock value, it's just there to be edgy, and it's badly done. Flat out, it's just badly done. You have a good story with hope, and then you have just overshadowed it with bad quality writing. There are stuff in these stories that are serious, but then you just end up going completely over the top and ruining both the seriousness of your story and ruining the seriousness of the topics that you're handling, which is flat out bad. I'm sorry to have gone on such a rant, and I've probably fumbled my words, but what I want to say is that these 3 side stories just completely ruined the tone of the entire story, and for me, it generally has ruined the experience of the story. I would have completely liked if they, either amped it down with their stories and, still made them be, like, the core message that they have is fine, like with the bullied student and, like, the soldier, like, I feel like the core message with them was fine, but the ending and the twist are so over the top that it just completely took me out, and I cannot say that I ended up liking it. If they replaced it with something that was more calm and in the nature of the game, I think I would have actually loved the story. But with the way they have done it now, it just immediately took me out, and I don't think I can say that I like the story. But that's just my own opinion and how I took it. I think it's more of a personal taste thing. If you can handle it, I think you would love the story. But I personally am just completely against that way of storytelling. So that's why I do think it's more of a personal taste thing, and I do really recommend you still try it yourself, because I could just be in the wrong. That's why I didn't particularly like the story. Now we go back onto the low quality video. My bad.
Don't get me wrong, I still like the core message a lot. I just think the method they used of storytelling just isn't the type that I like. So, like I said, please try this one yourself so you can actually get a good grip on it. The game being from the PC98 era is generally impressive to me, because it may be old, but I still think it's really technologically advanced. So technologically advanced that I would say it's better than most RPGmaker games that are out on the market in general. There are some things where it does actually show its age though. For example, there are no actual walking sprites. What will happen is whenever you tell it to go a certain way, it will just go and put the input of the direction it's facing and then just start moving. No walking sounds or like actual animation for it. So you just slide across the floor. Another example of where it does show its age is that for every interaction it needs an input. So whenever there's a text box and then there's supposed to be a dialogue choice, you first need to click enter so that the dialogue box appears, and then from there you can actually make your input. And also due to it not actually having like transitions between the text, it will just appear once, and then from there you have to like click, click, click until the screen turns black of the box, and then afterwards you have to put another input so it actually closes, which it's not that much of a problem, but I will say my enter key was a bit smashed at the end of the game. Either how, some things that did impress me were, for example, how smooth the transitions were. When you go from one screen to the other, it's so fucking fast and responsive that I'm actually impressed that it was made in PC98. Compared to some RPGmaker VX games where it takes like a couple of seconds and an entire black screen to go into the next screen, I thought it was really nice. Another example I could give of being pretty technologically advanced is that there's a lot of fucking animations put into this. Like in actual very detailed animations. I can give an example right now. Here you go. You barely see custom animations like this in RPGmaker games. I will get lucky if I play an RPGmaker game and there's an animation of the guy moving around very fast with some text box above him. The last actual thing I will touch on, because I really liked it, is the sound design. For most of the game you will hear this sound. But whenever an intense scene happens, the sound will actually start to amp up. The horns will start blaring and it will just become an entire amalgamation of sounds. Until at some point, it just all goes quiet. A small change of making the sound that you normally hear start to be distorted can actually really impact a scene like that. And that's very impressive and really nice. That is all I have to say for AZUSA999. I think that for the year it was released in, it's really impressive, but I just personally didn't like the story or just vibe with it. I will say it is one of the better games that I've currently played because I've currently only played 3 games, and this being the 4th one. So I will place it like just below off because I enjoyed the gameplay in off more and the world in off more. The gameplay in AZUSA999 is just you most of the time doing fetch quests, which I wouldn't really call that much of an engaging gameplay, but anyhow. I'm putting AZUSA999 just below off. That said, there's a huge fucking power gap between AZUSA999 and Akemi-tan. These are not comparable in any fucking way possible. Anyhow, on to the next game.
Alright. Never heard of this one before and I've never played it.